It was nearly 40 years ago that tunesmith John Lennon asked us to imagine a world with no religion. Well, had that prospect become a reality, it seems rather improbable that the events that took place in Orlando, Florida in June of 2016 would ever have taken place. I'm Ed Golly on the Atheist Forum. I'm joined on the set by President of Atheists of Florida, Hann, and we're going to talk a little bit about that, some news, tell you a little bit about Atheists of Florida, and hope we can entice you to consider joining our nonprofit organization here in Tampa, Florida. By now we know the details. We know the who, the where, the how, and the what. But the why is still eluding us about this, and as atheists, members of the community of reason, we are easily convinced that as religion continues to establish the foundation for discourse, that we seem to have misdirected our focus on hostility toward the LGBT community instead of what was probably the real foundation of this, which is simply religion itself. It continues to cause war, strife, hostility, and disagreement in our society and around the world because religions have this propensity to tell us that theirs is the one true religion, the only correct religion, and they even go so far as to say if you don't subscribe to it, you should be done away with. Christianity is not an exception to that rule. It is only because we cherry-pick Christianity and only look for the good in it and that we come to believe as a society that it's helpful, productive for us, leads us to a better life. The Muslims adhere to their religion more literally than the Christians do, and so we look at their actions with disdain and contempt, and yet if we subscribe to our cultural religion of Christianity, we would have exactly the same reaction toward them. Al, weigh in on this if you would, please.
Well, I think the largest problem here, at least as far as LGBT and religion versus religion, whatever, people are going to be gay. It's just part of nature. It's, you know, a natural thing, whatever. Some people will be. Unfortunately, if they're also brought up in a very religious environment, then they're going to be highly conflicted, and that's going to cause major problems for them and their happiness and, frankly, their mental health. I mean, it's just going to be tearing them in two directions at the same time.
I know that a lot of atheists that I meet in our organization almost all tell the same story of how they were reared in some kind of religion, began to question it when they got into their mid-teens or late teens, and found that none of the answers were really in any way responsive to what they were asking about. But a lot of them also are plagued for life with the guilt that religion instills in people about, you know, very natural reactions that we have, and of course that then overflows into their attitudes toward things such as homosexuality, abortion, and a lot of the issues that continue to divide our culture and the world. More so probably 20 to 30 years ago than they do now. When we look within our own community in the United States, I think we were divided by issues that were really strongly religious, that defined the conservative movement and the progressive or liberal movement that said, no, we need to have freedoms. Women should have the freedom to decide when they want to bear children. Same-sex couples should have the freedom to adopt children, to enter into marriage, and make the same kind of commitment and have the same kind of legal commitments to each other that conventional heterosexual married couples have. Extending into end-of-life issues that religion always is in the way of. And we saw that happen with Terry Schiavo in this state back when Jeb Bush was the governor, and he came in as if he was some kind of agent for some god that knew whether or not this family should have the right to make decisions about an end-of-life issue for a woman who was clearly brain dead and in a coma that she had no possibility of recovering from. And so when government steps into our lives in that way and it uses religion as the foundation to do that, they're really stepping squarely on the toes of our Constitution that says that we should have freedom from religion as well as freedom of religion. And I think that's a concept that's really hard for a lot of Americans to grasp. Good example is the merchants who don't want to serve same-sex couples or known homosexuals, or they don't want to hire them. Their position is, you're stepping on my religious freedoms to discriminate or be a bigot, right? But of course, in our culture, in our Constitution, the freedom extends first to the individual citizen and not to those who want to be bigoted against them and discriminate against them. And that's a lesson that we are gradually learning. I think the under 30s will embrace this without question when they get to be in control of society. They won't even consider these issues. But it has been, and it continues to be, a long struggle for us to come to grips with this because it represents a change. It's probably a little bit natural for all of us. It may be genetic for us to have some resistance to change because we don't know exactly what it's going to bring. It's going to make things worse or better. But of course, when we saw our federal Constitution amended to allow same-sex marriage, we didn't see hordes of locusts coming in. It just was business as usual. And life goes on, and it's not an issue. It was a non-issue for a long time that we've resolved, in spite of the fact that, as you've pointed out, there's still a lot of cultural hostility toward it. Something that we just need to outgrow as a culture. But of course, getting back to what happened in Orlando, this is an extreme, I think, representation of religion telling or convincing people that they should have that level of hostility towards something that is perfectly natural, which is homosexuality. It's going to be in what, as I understand it, maybe 10% of
Something
any
along
culture.
those lines, yeah.
Even if it's 2%, it doesn't matter. It's still something that is not a conscious decision by those who are homosexuals. It's a recognition of the way they are, and for religion to direct hostility toward that shows how primitive these ideologies are.
Well, look at the the reports that the shooter was himself gay.
Yeah.
That's and
right.
Frequented the club. I mean, the evidence is not all in on that yet, so I'm not sure that that's 100% true. But the point is, again, now you get into the conflicts.
So here we are in the middle of the year 2016, and in Florida, we still don't really have the complete civil liberties that the LGBT community should have had 50 years ago. Can we review a few of those things, Al, and see that we're still not fully up to speed? We haven't gotten over all of these issues yet. We haven't given full civil rights and liberties to all citizens of this country, no matter how much we beat our breasts and say we're the greatest and freest country in the world. It just depends on who you happen to be.
Well, yeah, I mean, it wasn't until 2010 that Florida allowed or removed the ban on gay and lesbian adoptions. And we were the last of the 50 states to do it.
Jeez, yes.
Let's see, in Florida, it's legal to fire someone or deny them access to housing or public accommodations because they are lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender. The LGBT community is left out of statewide non-discrimination protections.
And of course, our Attorney General has fought with tax dollars vociferously against the implementation of full civil liberties for all of these people who have been denied them, much the same as probably the politicians of our ancestors fought against voting rights and civil liberties for blacks back as long as 100 years after the misnamed Civil War. Right? It's the same thing, that it's a form of change that's resisted because, in this case, because of religion, and exclusively and only because of religions. If we had a world without that, we'd have reached this point 50 years ago, right? We'd have understood there's simply no reason to deny these people their civil liberties. It doesn't harm anybody else. They're guaranteed these liberties by the Constitution, yet we're still fighting them.
And that's the key. They're not harming anyone else.
Some of the issues that I remember that divided our country back 20 years ago were things that I remember observing how it seemed like all of them, or almost all the issues that so politically divided us as a nation were religious in foundation. These were things like abortion rights, prayer in school. You remember that Ronald Reagan wanted to amend the Constitution to reverse the Supreme Court's 8-1 decision in 1963 that declared prayer in public schools to be unconstitutional as recognized as a clear violation of state-church separation. That's right in the very first one of the Bill of Rights, First Amendment. And he thought, well, okay, the court's not going to agree with me because it's in the Constitution. The answer is just change the Constitution, right? In the same way that W wanted to amend the Constitution for the first time in history to put an amendment in that would specifically discriminate against a minority of American citizens and would have made same-sex marriage illegal throughout the land. Fortunately, he didn't get to do that or privatize Social Security. We got him out before he could do too much damage. But other things were like adoption by same-sex couples. End-of-life decisions we talked about, and of course, same-sex marriage. But now I notice that the things that tend to divide us are less religious, but not entirely void of it. Things like immigration now is, of course, a big issue in the political campaign. War that is the longest war we've ever been involved in, continues to go on and on. We can't seem to resolve that. Our national debt. It was something we didn't really talk much about 20 years ago. We just kept raising the debt limit and thinking, well, it's fine. All the Treasury bills were always sold right away, which meant that the citizens who bought them or the corporations that bought them or the rest of the countries in the world that bought them felt that the United States economy was strong. They're still selling them today. They can move all of them, even though we're trillions in debt. But now it's, socialism, health care has become an issue for us, and those are the things we're arguing about that are not so much religiously based, but yet religion still has its claws in the culture to the extent that it can cause a tragedy like we saw over in Orlando. So while it may not be the prime focus, it is still a very detrimental element of our society and of the world, causing conflicts for us. We still continue to call ourselves a Christian nation, even though we never have been.
Nope.
And I think that's what compels the media to never really expose what Christianity is, and the fact that it parallels the same books, the same Quran, the same Muslim religious ideologies that compels people to think we simply must destroy the infidels. Anybody who doesn't subscribe to our particular Muslim religion needs to be done away with. Remember, Christopher Hitchens said, if we don't stop these people now, they'll be at our doorstep. He said, you have no choice but to go over and destroy all these Muslims. And he was serious about it. And it was not like we can live an ocean apart and they can have their culture and we ours. He said, these people are such a significant threat to the world that if you don't destroy them, they'll destroy us. I didn't necessarily agree with him, but he may be right. He may, prove from the grave to have been right. But yeah, it does. If Christianity is adhered to as it is written in the Bible, we would have the exact same level of hostility toward the same issues that the Muslims do, and the same intolerance for any groups that don't subscribe to Christianity. And I think, wouldn't you agree with me, Al, that that's why statistically I've read that anywhere from 100,000 to 400,000 Iraqi citizens were killed when we invaded that nation, not one of whom ever posed a threat to this country, had the ability to pose a threat to it, or the means to carry it out. And yet, why are we unconcerned? We're more concerned about a 2-year-old that gets drowned by an alligator because they're all Muslims. They're dispensable. They aren't Christians, right? They are the throwaway religion, and if we bomb them into oblivion, we don't really care, right?
That just, that just breeds more violence from them. I mean, they're looking for revenge or,
Sure. Well, I think that was the foundation of the whole, really what I think would be considered the beginning point of this, mass terrorism, which was, of course, the World Trade Center back in 2001. When our politicians said, well, we want to know why this happened, I remember thinking, I can tell you exactly why it happened. Remember the Shah of Iran, right? Our CIA put him in power, and we had no concern for how brutal this guy was to his people, as long as he was selling us the oil we wanted and selling it to us at prices that would be profitable for the U.S. oil companies. And have the audacity to act as though they should be completely indifferent to what we're doing to them. Well, they had no means to strike back, back in his day and all through his life, and even when he came to this country, the only thing they could do was take over the embassy to show their contempt for the United States and how it was supporting this horrible dictator and depriving them of the very democratic process that we beat our breast and trumpet that we're going to extend to the rest of the world. That's as if it's some of our mission, and yet we prove decisively that it hasn't been. So all they could do was take over the embassy, which they did. But then technology gave them the means to strike back. And of course, as we all know, almost all of the 19 terrorists that executed that, I think like 15 of them, or 14 or 15, were Saudi Arabians. We never dropped a single bomb on them. And I don't know if any of them were from Iraq. I think not, because they were all members of Al-Qaeda. And Hussein hated Al-Qaeda. He would never, if they'd come into the country, he'd have killed them. So much for their freedom of religion. But anyway, I think that's where it started. And of course, now as we have this proliferation of these extremely dangerous weapons and ready access to them, we're going to simply see more of this. There probably are copycats as we talk right now thinking, how can I go out and get 75 or 100 people killed in a single incident?
That has been accelerating over time. I mean, let's sit here, between 1982 and 2012, there was 62 mass shootings. And of the 62, 49 of those, where is it? Should have read this better.
Oh, I wouldn't bother to prepare or anything. We'll do it on the fly. But yeah, your point is that
there's more happening. Yeah, here it is. Yeah, here it is. Between 82 and 2012, there was 62 shootings, but 20. Just found it here. Going from 1 in 2000 to 17 in 2013, with 26 in 2010. I mean, the numbers are accelerating, is what I'm trying to say.
And I think also, too, it's interesting to note that the perpetrator was a U.S. citizen born here. So that, and of course, a lot of American citizens who are conventional, typical American citizens have gone overseas to join ISIL or ISIS. Tim McVeigh was a former Marine, blew up the Murrah building.
Yeah, he was more in the white supremacist groups,
yeah,
but yes.
The Unabomber, so we can even see that this can influence Americans who, through the internet, come to subscribe to the Muslim religious ideologies. So, we can have people that don't even come to close to any kind of suspicion become motivated by these religious ideologies and think, yeah, this is really the right way, and I've got to react and do something about it. I want to read a letter that our organization sent over to some of the newspapers that got published over in Orlando. And it said, Atheists of Florida is saddened by the shootings at the club on Sunday morning. The members of the Atheists of Florida wish to extend condolences to the victims and their friends and families in this terrible time. Of course, we don't offer our prayers because that does no good. I think, why don't we just pray this will never happen again, and then we can test the power of prayer once and for all. Let's just pray that this never happens. There's never a religious motivated killing ever again. And then when it happens, we'll all know once and for all, prayer doesn't work, has no power, has no effect, has no event. So we can quit wasting our time sending prayers to people, right? Anyway, back to the letter. The organization urges calm and reason in this time when despair deepens. in the face of rage expressed by those who fed the defense of their religion, feel that the defense of their religion requires them to exercise homicidal violence against those with competing views and different lies. Of course, same thing we've just been talking about here on the program. For we Americans, honoring the hard-won struggle against the continuous attempted hegemony of fanatical religious believers, this terrible massacre demonstrates yet again how difficult it is to build a true democracy. Disagreement is essential to human progress. The freedom to hold and express religious, political, and social views is a personal right that is protected by our Constitution, especially the First Amendment. And in order to accomplish this goal, it is imperative to protect the secular nature of our state. She closes with a quote from Albert Einstein that says, "Only a life lived for others is a life worthwhile." And that was written by our President Judy Adkins of Atheists of Florida. I think it sums up the way probably most people in the community of reason would react to this. And so it seemed to be worth publishing. All right, any further comments, Al? Questions, insults, whatever? No. Let's take a moment to talk about some other things that are going on, because even though this dominates all of our news and seems to be the only thing CNN wants to talk about for about a week straight, we saw an item I think is kind of interesting that's happening over in Australia, where they're conducting their census for this year in 2016, and they send out a census form which includes a question about the respondents' religion, what religion they subscribe to, or do they subscribe to no religion at all? And there's actually a campaign by the freethinkers and the atheists and the humanists in Australia to encourage Australians to put down none on the form this year, because they think that actually this year's census could see that Christianity would no longer be the most popular position of the citizens of Australia, and it could mean that the nuns would actually outnumber the religious people in Australia, the consequences of which would be that it could change the way that government policy is made and how projects are funded in Australia. So it's a subtle change, but overseas experience is that moving the no religion option to the top of the list of responses on the question of religion has seen a dramatic rise in the number of people identifying with a particular faith. This year's census has done that, with the option moved to the top of the list of possible responses to the question of what is the person's religion. So no longer at the bottom, it's now on the top. For the first time since the no religion option was introduced, and that was back in 1991. Prior to that, cultural assumption, everybody believes in a God, and those who don't really realize that they really do, right? The option of Catholic has moved to second on the list. It'll be interesting to see. We'll watch that and see how the poll comes out and report it on a future forum. One of the things that we are doing at Atheists of Florida this year in August is Skepticamp 2. Numbered 2 because we had our first one, I believe, 2 years ago, and it was a very successful event. So we're ready to do it again. This will be on August 27th of this year, 2016. It'll be in Clearwater, Florida. And if you want more information about it, you may simply go to our site, AOF.NGO. That will get you to our website where you can read our newsletters, learn more about Atheists of Florida, the issues we're concerned with, read about state-church separation news around the country and the world, and figure out how to go to Skepticamp 2 if you'd like to. It is billed as an afternoon of fun, education, and camaraderie for people interested in cultivating their skepticism, the first line of criticism against religious, political, and other nonsense. Our previous camp was quite a success, so we've moved to a little bit larger venue. We had it in Tampa before, now it'll be in Clearwater. And you can just go to the website, Skepticamp 2, and it will tell you everything about that. Again, it's August 27th of 2016. Also, if, again, if you'd like to find out more about Atheists of Florida, you may go to our site. You can see our newsletter, which is in color when it's on the site. We've posted, I think, practically every newsletter we've ever done. I don't know why you'd want to read back that far, but you can see some of the more current newsletters that tell you what we're doing these days, what we're up to, and how we're doing it and why. And again, we encourage you, if you're interested in atheism, free thought, if you'd like to join, it's very economical. You have several advantages, some of which are pointed out on the newsletter, to joining if you really care about state-church separation or want to get involved with other atheists. Almost everybody that responds to our questionnaire says the reason that they want to join our meetup is because they want to meet like-minded people. And that's what you'll find here at Atheists of Florida. We also have an extensive print library of books that have been donated over the years to us, which we can't give away anymore. So it's a good research library, and we allow members to check out the books, some of which are just fascinating books, covering a full range of topics that have to do with state-church separation, religion, criticism of religion, and some of the kinds of political and social issues that we've been talking about and how religion has affected them over the centuries. So with all of that said now, do you have any final comments, questions, issues, statements about what we've been dealing with here? Kind of way you would like to wrap it up? You know, I hate to say it, Al, but the best advice is keep your head low, because we know this is going to happen again.
Yes.
Right? I mean, it's, I'm not telling you I'm a prophet. I'm a realist. And the world is doing nothing to cure the inherent hostility between different religions and those of us who subscribe to no religion at all. We have for so long been more hated than any other minority group. I think I read a poll recently that said nowadays 56% of Americans would actually vote for an atheist, but and fewer would vote for socialists. So we're making a little bit more progress in being accepted into the culture. The largest age group that rejects religion now in the United States is the 18 to 30 age group by a substantial,
yeah, 30% or something
Exactly.
like that. It's a big number, yeah.
And of course, in the older age group, the over 60s, it's still in the same type of percentages it had been for years, going back into the previous century. That meter doesn't seem to budge very much, little bit. And I've heard that that's attributed largely to the internet, the ease in access in getting information to those who question religion and want to know more about their own religion and other religions, and it allows them to expand their mind and really appraise the reason that they should live their lives without religion, and the fact that we consider ourselves intellectually free, being able to live without religion. And I think a lot of that age group is coming to the exact same conclusion that those of us who are older have for all of our adult lives, and in some cases for our entire lives. That's all we have. Again, AF.NGO gets you to Atheists of Florida. Along with Hann, I'm Ed Golly, thanking you for joining us here on the Atheist Forum. Hope you'll check in on some future programs. Till then, remember that if the story seems a little bit too implausible to be true, don't believe it just because somebody wrote it down.
Make them prove it.